Yo, what is up, gamer gang? So today I kind of have a special video for my fellow Steve mains. So there's a common question I always get under most of my Steve videos, being one, how do I open up opponents with Steve? Most of my opponents are just mid-ducking, so I struggle at opening opponents up. And the second being how to advance with Steve, or basically how to get in with this character. So this is what I want to address in this video. So without wasting any of your time, let's talk about it. First, let's start with opening up your opponent with Steve. So to talk about that, you have to first talk about Steve's archetype. You have to understand what Steve's archetype is. So Steve is a very compact heavy character. He is a very safe character, does not take that many risks. And as a price for that, he doesn't really have good lows or like heavy hitting lows. He doesn't really have very strong pokes, something like a Jin down back 4 or like a Jin down 2 or Dragonov down 2. He has a really good frames on his lows as well. He doesn't have big launchers, does not have a 15 frame launcher and a 15 frame outstanding launcher as well. So these are the sacrifices that come with being Steve. He is a very safe and compact character, as well as being a poke heavy and counter hit hitting character. So most people don't get this fact about Steve. When you say you're struggling at opening up your opponent, that's because Steve does not have those big lows, right? He does not have that Jin down 2, or that down back 4, that Dragonov down 2, that Shaheen slide, that low slide. That's not your strength, that's not your archetype. So yes, your opponent won't be inclined to duck against you normally, right? There's no big reason to duck against Steve. And that's where I think a lot of people struggle at understanding how Steve works. The tools that opponents are mostly going to duck against you is 1, back 1, and 2, his jabs. 3 being quarter circle forward, 2 his low, of course, that being launch punishable on block, so opponents look for that, but mostly it's about back 1 and jabs. These are the 2 moves that opponents look for, and at the highest level, this is why they're going to duck against Steve. So the idea with Steve is to irritate your opponent and force them to start ducking, because let me start from the beginning first. Like Steve, like I said, is a very compact character. He's very safe. It is not that easy to get in against Steve for free. Steve has really good keep out tools. He has back 1, he has jabs, he has rocket launcher, and in Tekken 8 he now has up back 3 or his back kempo. So getting in against Steve is very frustrating, number 1. And number 2, I said is compact. He is very safe. It is very difficult to get big punishers against Steve. So the price you pay for that is not having big ways or like big lows to open up your opponent. So Steve, again, is also a counter hit heavy character. So you want to get your opponent to start pressing buttons. So to opening up an opponent with Steve is not about using big low so they start ducking. The idea of opening up your opponent with Steve is to get them to start pressing buttons to get more counter hits off of them. The other way is irritating your opponent with lows. We're speaking about down 1, we're speaking about down 2. Like you chip away at the opponent, right? And this gets annoying. So what does the opponent do? They realize, okay, this guy is chipping away at my health bar, I need to retaliate. And then they do that, boom, you have up back 3, back kempo. You have back 1, you have jabs to keep them out. That's the idea, guys. Like it might seem like it's hard, and it does feel that way with Steve. It is hard because it doesn't really have that big, that big tool to just tell them, okay, start ducking against me, start ducking, like outside of down back 3 at the wall, right? You don't have that. You have to be very strategic with Steve. You have to be very technical, right? And again, it comes at the cost of being a very safe and compact heavy character. So you want to get your opponent to start pressing buttons. That's the idea of opening up opponents with Steve. It's because of the counter hits. In Tekken 8, they try to deviate this a bit by giving him his what's his stance called? His Lionheart stance, because Lionheart is Steve's 50-50 stance. This is a stance you use if you want to take big risks, right? Throughout the unblockable high or mid for the 50-50 mix-up. Outside of that, everything else you have is just poke pressure, like his flicker stance is just for pressure, and his peekaboo. I talked about having to irritate your opponent, and peekaboo is the best stance at doing this because he has that peekaboo down 1, right, to counter out sways. Down 1, he has a down forward 2, and again, being a counter hit archetype character, he has that peekaboo 2, which launches on counter hit. So you want to irritate your opponent to start pressing buttons. That's the idea of how you want to open up characters or open up opponents with Steve. Yes, he is a counter hit heavy character, but there is no way you are going to fight an opponent and not land a single counter hit with Steve. Like, that's just impossible. At some point, your opponent has to be aggressive. They just run at you blindly and you will land at least a couple of counter hits in a set. That's the idea with Steve. Very different from like Mishimas. You don't have that hillsweep, guys. You don't have those 50-50s outside of Lionheart and maybe at the wall with down back 3-2 and Kotaseko forward. When you don't have that, you want to poke your opponent, poke the hell out of them, get them to start pressing buttons, leaving them susceptible to counter hit 2s. That's one. Number two, you have your Lionheart mix-ups if you want to take big risks. That's his like big way to open up your opponents. And of course, in Hit, they did give him the command grab option, so it's another way to implement 50-50s. You can do extended duck into 1+2 if they start ducking. If they don't, go for the command grab. Like, it's not one particular way that you're going to be opening up your opponent. Steve has like different. He's got a bunch of different factors. At the war game, he's got his war game, he's got his mix-up game with Lionheart, and he has his throw game when he is in Hit. That's what you need to understand with Steve. Don't just do like dash up, Jin dash up down 2, Dragunov dash up down 2. You're not that type of character with Steve. Very, very technical. It is situational as to when and how you will be opening up your opponent. I hope I'm making sense. Again, I apologize, guys, for my English. English is not my first language, so I try by all means to make you guys understand as much as possible. So I tend to repeat myself an annoying amount of times that I know this, but I just want you guys to get the best out of what I'm trying to say. Okay, and secondly, let's talk about getting in with Steve. People struggle to get in with Steve, and honestly, I feel as though Steve is one of the easiest characters in the game to get in, like on an opponent. So basic way, okay, let me start by saying getting in an opponent is very much up dependent. You have to take into consideration which character you're fighting before just going in with what I'm about to tell you. So for example, let's say Mishimas. Mishimas have that electric, so you have to take that into consideration. No, you can't just dash in against Mishimas because they do have that electric. So I'll talk about that later. Let's first talk about the Steve specific stuff. Firstly, his jabs, 1-2-1 and 1-2. This is like your basic B and B of getting in against your opponent. You can cancel the third string into Flicker or Peekaboo to continue pressure, your annoying cheap pressure in Peekaboo, or just pressure from Flicker. You can even cancel that to Peekaboo, or you can even cancel that into Flicker. That's like the basic 1-on-1 of Steve's getting in. So like I always say in my guides and my videos, what you do against your opponent depends on whether you learn something on block or on hit. Like, study your opponent's reactions as well. Like, what is your opponent doing after you do 1, 2, 3? Are they challenging you? Are they backdashing? Are they sidestepping? Then make a decision based out of that. Just because I say you can use 1-2-1 to get in with Steve doesn't mean you always have to be offensive when you go with 1-2-1. You're like 1-2-1 backdash, 1-2-1 back kempo. It's all about making reads. But what I mean is you can just get in, initiate pressure with the jabs, right? That's like one basic way. Another way, of course, is forward 3. You guys know how much I love forward 3. I always talk about forward 3. This is one of the most underrated strats against with Steve. Like, forward 3 is amazing because first of all, it high crushes, so in a ducking state every time you do forward 3, and you actually recover from crouch. And Steve has a very strong low in full crouch down forward 1. Well, strong in the sense of Steve, of course. So this is very good against characters that have very good high crush or like jabs, like Mishimas, for example. Mishimas have that electric, and Devojin has that up forward one, which is very, very annoying to deal with. Well, going in with Steve forward 3 completely nullifies electric spam or like up forward 1 spam in case of Devojin, because again, you recover from full crouch. Again, like forward 3, then if you noticed, you've gone right under an electric, so forward 3, then down back, cancel into outstanding 1-2 punish. I've spoken about this so many times, guys. Please check out my 15 tips video about Steve. I cover this like in depth. So you want to use forward 3 a lot. You can even cancel forward 3 by holding down back and do forward 3 again. So you do have like this wave dash looking thing, or like this crouch dash cancel, or extended duck wave cancel, no matter like depending on what you want to call it. But it's like another really good way to go in with Steve. Now, not as strong as it was back in Tekken 7, because You could do like forward 3 into cancel or standing 2. In all standing 2 in Tekken 7 was a counter hit launcher, but that was nerfed, so not as strong, but it's still viable. You have stuff like rocket launcher, a very good zoning too, but even on block it's only -1, so you can still continue your pressure afterwards. You can use still sway, you can power crush. I do that a lot if you watch my Steve videos. You have albatross 2. You have dash up, even just like dash up, back 2, because it's a homing move. Dash up, down 2 has pretty good tracking, not very risky. Just like basic stuff. But like I said, guys, it's matchup dependent mostly with how you want to get in with Steve. For example, against Brian, you can't do stuff like forward 3 cancels with Brian, because Brian does have that quarter circle forward 3+4. He has 3+4. He has quarter circle back 1, so that's very risky against Brian. Even just 1-1 against Brian is very risky, because quarter circle back 1 with Brian has an annoying amount of high crash for some reason, so it's very risky throwing out random jabs with Steve against Brian. That's something you must take into consideration. So against Brian, something like down forward 2 is very effective, right? So just basic stuff like this. I can't really talk about every character in the game, because this will end up being an hour-long video, but maybe I'll just make a crazy video talking about Steve matchup against every character in the game eventually. But like, I'm just giving you guys an idea. It's not really the same against every character and how you want to initiate your offense or just go in with Steve. It mostly depends on the character you're fighting. So I really hope I've made sense. I just can't keep on repeating myself, but I hope, please let me know if I'm making sense, guys. I know I do a lot of guides, but like sometimes I just think to myself, am I talking sense, or is everything going over, you know, am I just rambling? So, you know, I hope it does make sense. But if you do have some specific questions on what I'm not clear about, please do let me know. Of course, leave your comments in the section and just ask me questions, guys, and let me know how we go from there. So yeah, something basic I wanted to talk about. Maybe I will make something more in-depth in the future. I'll let you guys know. So again, thank you so much, you guys, for the support. It's been amazing. If you've made it this far, please do the usual, like, subscribe, and support your boy. And yeah, take care, my boys. Even the frame data be ever in your favor. GG.